Hi, everyone. I wanted to start by thanking Shlomit for asking me to speak. She's been such a hopeful and positive presence through the Aliyah process. And I'm just going to take you through my journey with Israel from start to finish. So please bear with me, especially through some of the sappy parts. So growing up, I knew next to nothing about Israel. My middle name, Limor, named after my Israeli cousin, felt foreign and even somewhat embarrassing to me because it didn't sound like my other classmates' middle names. Of course, now I couldn't be more proud of it. My grandfather, a Holocaust survivor, rarely spoke about Israel. He carried the weight of his experiences silently, and it wasn't until after his death that I learned how deeply connected he felt to our family there. After a challenging freshman year in college, coupled with the passing of my grandfather, I found myself in need of a break. I decided to take a gap year to regroup and figure out my next steps. At the end of this transformative year, I decided to take a trip to Israel through the Birthright program. As I shared plans with family members, they began to recount stories of my grandfather's deep ties to Israel. I learned that he had moved his mother to Netanya to be closer with her sister and that he visited Israel whenever he could. These stories revealed a side to him that I had never known and deepened my resolve to explore that part of my heritage. My journey began at JFK, where I met my fellow Birthright participants. On the flight, I spent nearly the entire time talking to an Orthodox woman who I happened to be sitting with on the plane. As someone who was raised Jewish but not religious, I found our conversation eye-opening. We shared our transformative experiences from the past year, with both of us brushing away tears on the transatlantic flight. I learned about Jewish traditions that were foreign to me, but I wanted to learn more about, such as what to do on Shabbat or what a mikveh is. Before we parted, she invited me to her son's wedding, which I later attended while living in Jerusalem. We are still in touch to this day. Upon arriving in Israel, in true Israeli fashion, there was no time to waste. Everyone got their bearings, exchanged a bit of money, and then we were off to Jerusalem. After playing a few get-to-know-you games and meeting the ever-so-handsome IDF soldiers, we made our way to the Western Wall. I'm not sure if it was delirium from not having slept the past 24 hours, but I was struck with a feeling that I had never experienced before. I felt a connection to a land, to a people, and to something so much bigger than myself. We traveled all over the country, from staying in Bedouin tents to hiking Masada. Each experience deepened my understanding of Israel's history and the struggles of its people. Meeting the young IDF soldiers and hearing their stories were particularly impactful. We visited Mount Herzl and walked from grave to grave of the young soldiers who had died in battle. I listened to our guide read notes of siblings and friends who had written to their fallen loved ones. I brushed away tears behind my sunglasses, a bit embarrassed at how emotional I was. After the Birthright trip, I stayed with my family in the north. They took me in like one of their own, despite most of them never having met me before. This unconditional love and hospitality were unlike anything I had experienced in America. I played with the younger kids and tried to communicate with the older kids using my broken Hebrew and their English. Leaving my family in the north was difficult, but I was excited to start my internship at Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. I was working in breast cancer research, and my research mentor took me in not only as a mentee, but as almost family, inviting me over for Shabbat and introducing me to her own family. During my lunch breaks, I would walk the halls of the hospital and see everything from headscarves to hijabs. I couldn't believe this mix of ethnicities, nationalities, and cultures, groups of people who are painted as enemies by the American newspapers and media, were working side by side. This experience solidified my desire to return to Israel later on. During my senior year of college, I discovered a Fulbright grant to study in Israel 2 days before the application deadline and far past my own university deadline. Despite the tight timeline, I knew I had to apply. After much persistence and the sense of chutzpah that I gained from my time in Israel, I convinced my university to submit my application. Because of the pandemic, I enlisted the help of friends and family, and after all, they had nothing better to do. As graduation approached, I still hadn't heard back from Fulbright and assumed I didn't get the grant. I accepted a job offer from a biotech company in LA and started making plans to move. Then, the day I signed my offer letter, I received news that I had been awarded the Fulbright grant. During this hectic time, my Aunt Michelle, who was battling breast cancer, took a turn for the worse. I made several trips back to the East Coast to visit her and eventually attend her funeral. My Aunt Michelle had an indomitable spirit. She once took off in the backcountry of Mexico while studying there, and after losing cell service, my grandparents ended up flying all the way to Mexico to make sure she was okay. I couldn't ignore this flashing light urging me to seize this once-in-a-lifetime adventure, especially after seeing how firsthand short and precious life can be. I quit my job and moved back to the East Coast while preparing to embark on the Fulbright grant. During my grant, I studied with people all over the world. I would sit overlooking the beautiful city of Haifa and the Mount Carmel forests with two new lifelong friends from Germany and Italy, Judith and Lucy, while we sipped strong cappuccinos and talked about our childhoods. They forced me to slow down and enjoy the taste of fresh Italian pasta and dark German chocolate, and for this, I'm forever grateful. I became a residential advisor and hosted multicultural events for everyone who lived in the dorms. I lived with an Arab Israeli, a friend from the West Bank, and 2 Americans. We talked long into the night about our families and our ambitious careers. I fell in love with a boy from Ramat Gan and spent weekends with his family. Family was everything to them. It was during this time that I realized not only did I want a large family of my own, but I could have one. His mom raised 4 incredible kids while working full-time. She embodied the true strength of an Israeli woman, especially while one of her sons has been in active duty and then joined the reserves right after his service was technically over. When it came time for the grant to end, I started feeling this immense pressure to come back to the States and get a real job. And if I'm being honest with you, and more importantly myself, I was not ready to come back. I'd fundamentally changed how I saw the world and what I wanted. It's hard to put into the words the connection I feel in Israel. Whether it's because of the hardship or shared history, there's a sense of connection that's undeniable. So when people ask, why are you going back in the middle of this crazy war? To be honest, there's not really an answer that you can respond to in one sentence. It's more of a feeling that you will know when you touch down in Ben Gurion Airport. It is the feeling when you wait in an hour for the Shabbat bus that never comes with 2 strangers and then share a taxi cab ride home. It's the feeling of catching up with your favorite fruit seller at the shuk, but only after months of bargaining for every apple in order to earn his respect. It is the feeling of having to pause every Saturday to spend time with loved ones, whether you like it or not, because the entire country is closed. It is the feeling of looking at the Mediterranean Sea from Charles Clore Park with Jaffa's sandstone buildings studding the coast and feeling like you are in the most beautiful and most ancient land in the world. And finally, it is the feeling of standing at the Western Wall, knowing you are a part of a history of people who have experienced generations of indescribable pain and yet find a way to love, connect, laugh, celebrate, and rejoice in life. I am Yisrael Chaya. Thank you.